one of the questions that I was asked not long ago by I would say a casual Canes fan, and it's a fantastic question. I'm not knocking the question asker. The question was simply, what's different this year? Right? If you're a casual fan, you pay attention, you check the scores in the morning, you're probably not staying up for a 10 o'clock game, but you would if it was a 7 o'clock game, right? You're a casual fan. All you know is the Canes have been good for a long time, but they kind of make it to the same spot in the postseason and fizzle out. So this year, before I go get my hopes up, before I go invest, what's different? And I thought there's two ways I could have answered that question. And this is why you don't ask a sports radio host like a casual question and conversation, because you don't get, the answer is this. You get, I'll answer that in a 7-part outline. Let's start with number 1. And they're like, oh, gosh. I could have answered like real technical hockey stuff and just said, this is what Keandre Miller brings to the table. This is what Alexander Nikishin's potential is. Here's Nikolai Ehlers, who's one of the crown jewels of the free agency class. Or I could answer with something more vibey. Right, I could go a little more in theory. And I'm going with vibes. The Canes may not actually be that much younger than in years past. I went and looked it up. Like average age of roster on opening night, it's negligible. It's like 28.4 this year, 28.1 another, 28.5. Like it just seems like most NHL rosters are somewhere in the around 28 years on average age. So they might not actually be much younger this year than in years past. But vibes, they seem 100 times younger. And there's two things that I'm going to point out here. One, the captain, Jordan Staal, will play his 900th game as a member of the Carolina Hurricanes tonight in San Jose.
That's crazy. 900 in just a Canes uniform.
Exactly. And he had a whole life before, we don't acknowledge it, but the whole life in the NHL before playing for the Carolina Hurricanes. Only 3 players in the entire franchise's history, going back to when they were the Whalers, have played more than 900 games as a member of this franchise. Ron Francis, Glenn Wesley, Eric Staal. And guess what? He's going to pass Eric Staal like maybe, I don't know exactly, in the next month. He's only 9 games behind after tonight, Eric Staal. And obviously that comes, you don't get to 900 games with a team, especially your second team. Not saying you got to 900, but like after playing for a bunch of years for another team. It doesn't happen unless you're getting up there in age, right? Unless you're a little long in the tooth, as they say. And then the other thing that's happening is we don't know the availability of Jacob Slavin over the next however long, right? Did we ever, and I pay attention to this stuff as much as anybody, and it hasn't come across my purview. Did we learn if Slavin was on the plane yesterday?
I did not. I do not know.
The last bit of info we have then is Rod Brind'Amour updating everybody after practice yesterday. We have that audio here. So here's Rod from after practice yesterday, which was here in Carolina before leaving for the West Coast, on still being unsure if Slavin will suit up.
Maybe. He's getting looked at again, and so he didn't feel great at the end of the game. That's still to be TBD, I think.
Still TBD. So we'll say still TBD. For the first time in a while, again, it's more vibes than it is on actual roster averages. I think the Canes can lean on the young guys to grind the regular season a lot more. To be the cornerstones that have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. If Slavin has to miss some time, and goodness knows that the Canes would miss him, as any team that would miss a player of Slavin's caliber. But if Slavin has to miss some time, you're not looking towards Brent Burns or a guy who's actually going to be on the other side of this matchup tonight, Dmitry Orlov. Like, you're not looking towards 38s and 32s and 33s and saying, we're going to need you to wind back the clock and have the energy of a mid-20s guy. You're leaning on actual mid and early 20s guys. Keandre Miller is 26. I mean, we know Alexander Nikishin is young, right? He's a rookie, 23. Jalen Chatfield might be 29 years old, but again, vibes are younger. Jordan Staal, when you look at the forwards, will always lead his line, and it's an important line, and they have the identity, and they're grinding, right? They're checking, they're doing what they have to do. But the strength of the forwards this year for the Carolina Hurricanes, it's young. I'll start with youngest. Stankoven, 22. Blake, 22. Jarvis, 23. Even Svech. Svech is 25 years old.
Grizzled young vet.
He is exactly. It's funny because Jarvis is always going, why are you acting like I'm old? I'm not 40. I'm sure he treats Svech like he is 40. He's only 25. Aho, 28. Ehlers, 29. It is, even with, and they do have their vets, don't get me wrong, but I look at this team and I see a youthful energy that I have not seen in a while, right? In a while. And I think that's underrated. You go back like 3 years ago, if even like Aho's more of an old soul. If it felt like there were just a bunch of like old guys that wanted to be in bed by 8:45, and then Jarvis trying to provide all of the spark as, the little kid in the room. Now it just seems more fun rather than, grizzled. Grizzled's a good word. I'll use grizzled. And this is no disrespect to some guys that were on those teams, but grizzled doesn't sound like the most exciting and most fun way to go to work every day. How was work today? Grizzled. How was work today? Grinding. That's not fun, right? I think this Carolina Hurricanes team, in addition to the Ehlers and like the actual tangible additions, the difference between this year and last year is like, a little bit more kid energy. And the last part I'll bring up about this is, and I know Canes fans in particular really don't like when you look to other teams to like, hey, that you could learn something from this. I'm still wildly impressed by the trio of players with Pittsburgh, right? The little group led by Sidney that's been there for 20 years as teammates. And did you see when Marc-Andre Fleury has spent like the week there and played in one more kind of retirement preseason game? Did you see what he did the entire time he was there?
What was that?
Pranks.
Oh, yeah.
He was messing with their cars. He was messing with their lockers. And part of me was like, all right, guys, you're like 40 years old. But then the other part of me was like, I think that might be why that group did so well together, because they kept like the pond hockey kids spark the entire time they were together. And the moment they got back together, it went right back to like we're 17-year-old prospects again. Like it went right back to it. 22-year-old, newly rich young guys again. I think this year's Canes team can have a bit of that, right? A bit of fun, a bit of college atmosphere, and I think it'll breathe new life to the Staal and Martinook guys, the guys that have been around a while. I think it'll breathe new life into the older guys because you can't help it. You can't help it. The youth keeps you young. You know what I mean? That's what I hope, in addition to the actual tangible hockey stuff, is different this year about the Carolina Hurricanes. I hope we get stories of hijinks on the road after this 2-week road trip. I want Jarvis tying like two hotel doors together across the hall, knocking on both doors and watching them open and just close it on each other. That's what I want. I want Stalzy, when he gets off the elevator, hitting all of the buttons so they got to ride him one at a time. That's what I want.